Hello, CPAC. It is such a joy to be with all of you again. You know, the mission of CPAC, to unite and equip the broad political right to make a difference, has never been more important than it is now. I'm so thankful for all of you and for the many of you who contributed enormously at the time of the state election, probably also before and after, but thank you so much for the support that you've given over the years. Let me start with a story. There is nothing more iconic than having an ice cream on Cylinder Beach on beautiful North Stradbroke Island. Yeah, you've done it, haven't you? For over 40 years, parents and grandparents have made it a ritual to buy one for their kids as they sit on the sand after a day of swimming in sand castles, maybe while watching pods of whales arch past. And for Deb and her family, selling this ice cream was her family's livelihood. They did it year in, year out, making a modest but reliable income in a place they loved to be. They adored being part of other people's family traditions. But her family had been told by the local council that it would no longer be allowed. And you might wonder why. The answer she was given was safety. Now, you might be wondering whether you have missed the copious media coverage of the dangers of selling or indeed eating ice cream on the beach. Had there been some nefarious problem with poisoned ice cream? Or maybe a dangerous brawl between armed ice cream vendors? I'm afraid, well, I'm pleased to say, none of those things have happened. There have been no safety incidents. But a heavy-handed bureaucrat and the local council decided that it was no longer safe for this business to operate on the sand. The only casualty at the beach has been Deb's family's livelihood and some fun times and memories for kids. This kind of madness played out in ways big and small right over Queensland over the last decade, and it's costing us more than lost good times. I'll give you another example. Not long ago, I got a phone call from the owner of a seafood store at Amity Point. His practice for decades, something you've probably all done from time to time, has been to occasionally collect a bucket of seawater from the ocean with which to defrost frozen prawns on the days when the catch is light. There's no better way to defrost them if you've tried it, and it's never before been a problem. But rangers had told him that taking seawater in any quantity, however small and for whatever purpose, requires an application form and a decision to grant him a permit because it's the taking of a natural resource, and doing it without a permit will result in a non-negotiable and on-the-spot fine of $806. No joke for a bucket of seawater. There is zero environmental harm, and last time I checked, we're not running out of seawater. By this logic, every toddler who takes home a handful of sand would need a permit or a fine. It seems so small and so silly, but the cost is real. That cost either gets passed on to the person who wants to buy their seafood, or it erodes the already slim margins of the small business owner until there is nothing left but to close the doors and let their staff go. It is a fundamental conservative value that governments should be light touch, that they should set a framework for enterprise without being heavy-handed, that they must, wherever possible, reduce the cost and diversion caused by permits and paperwork to businesses of all sizes, but particularly to the small ones. We don't do this for its own sake or out of some sense of being beholden to the big end of town's businesses or even some desire to please economists. Quite the opposite. We must do these things because a low bureaucracy, attractive environment for enterprise is the very best way we can extend the gift that is human opportunity to all, and particularly to those in our community who need it most. If I was in the left, just picture that for a moment, I might have said, this is a social justice issue. But in the broadest possible sense of that somewhat difficult term, it actually is. More than anything else known to us from human history, it is enterprise in the free market that has lifted more people out of poverty than anything else that has ever been tried. It has lifted living standards, delivered greater freedom and choice, and brought better health than ever before. And yet, in a decade of decline under Labor here in Queensland, the burden of regulation, of sweetheart deals with militant union mates, the prioritisation of environmental extremism, cronyism and incompetence, well, scenarios like this became the norm. Building a productive economy matters, and as part of the LNP team here in Queensland, we are making it a priority. It's the way that we give those people who take their savings and plough them into a business in the belief that their years of risk and effort will pay off. All those years spent paying themselves last, as we all know small business people do, that it will ultimately mean they and their kids have a chance to grow and thrive. It's how we put downward pressure on the cost of living so that wages growth more closely aligns with inflation. It's how we bring back the big things like affordability for a home. We want that to be within reach for young people, and in doing so, give them the entree to establishing their own families and seeing the value in building the next generation. Home ownership makes connected community contributors who are part of the fabric of civil society that is the best possible inoculation against the mental challenges and hopelessness that come with isolation. We don't often think of stronger bonds between neighbours and better mental health as the payoff for better productivity. But when you track it through to its ultimate conclusion, it really is. Productivity reform is the way we get better wages for working people without making businesses fail in a nihilistic zero-sum game. And it's the pathway to repaying the record debt that Labor left behind. It was to be $218 billion by the end of their last budget, and $39,000 for every man, woman and child in this state. More than even Victoria, can you believe that? Sorry, Victorians. Without reducing the service standards that Queenslanders demand. To understand how this affects the state budget, consider this. Another little story. The Gladstone Port Corporation in the last term of Labor went from having the best reputation with the coal industry on the east coast of this nation to having the absolute worst. Between July and December of 2023, the uncommercial approach of those who ran the Gladstone Port has had a catastrophic impact on Queensland's reputation as a place worth investing. Needless to say, we're working very hard to change that. As the major mining industry port for Queensland, publicly owned, it should be working 24 hours a day with rolling shifts. But during this period, because of a failure to staff it properly, it was lucky to have one 8-hour shift running a day. Management weren't working the assets hard. The ships were queuing at sea, waiting to load that beautiful Queensland coal, each one paying demurrage for the delay. Mines had to slow down their operations because they were becoming gridlocked by the blockage at the port. And all because of a desire to make the short-term balance sheet look good by cutting staff costs. The port's take-or-pay contracts meant that miners had to pay the same amount whether the port held up its end of the deal or not. So what that meant was that the port earned the same fee in the hand in the short term, whether it moved 1 million tonnes through the port or, say, 6 million tonnes. So Labor just went, no big deal, the port got paid, for now at least. But here's the kicker. The balance sheet might have looked fine for that upcoming budget cycle. It might have made the former Treasurer happy in the short term. But an independent report commissioned by the port revealed that 4.4 million tonnes of loading opportunity was lost. You might say, so? Well, that cost Queensland some $200 million in royalties it did not earn, as mines were forced to slow down their operations because goods couldn't get through the port. It's lost productivity, not through the failure of works, but through the failure of leadership, the failure to see the big picture. It reduces investment and means high-paying jobs go elsewhere. $200 million in royalties gets you a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, or a lot of police officers to keep our streets safe. It's a lot of roads and bridges we won't get. It's debt that isn't repaid. And all because the government-owned enterprise wasn't running with an eye to being productive for you. They weren't hungry to deliver for Queensland. In fact, they turned business away. It's incompetent. Let's call it what it is. And it costs you in the interest bill, in the services that you didn't get, in the missed opportunity for lower taxes, in the debt you shouldn't be paying, in the inflation in the cost of everything. Productivity matters. And an LNP government that respects your money will drive for it. So whether you're an ice cream seller, a fish shop owner, a builder or a coal miner, we are taking action to conquer over-regulation, to equip government-owned enterprises for better performance, and to hunt down all of those little 1%ers for improvement that will transform this economy into one that is productive. Oh. Thank you. One of the greatest opportunities we have to boost productivity is through the work we have underway to tackle the cost of having your own home. You will have noticed, for those of you who follow the subject, that rents rose steeply under Labor. Now, given they like to talk about social justice, you might contemplate what their response was. Well, first it was to propose a new investment tax on properties, as well as a suite of additional regulations so complex and heavy-handed that property investors wanted to exit the market. And of course, it doesn't take a genius to know that fewer rental properties is a curse on the most vulnerable people in our community, the very opposite of what was needed. I can only be grateful they stopped short of doing what they had foreshadowed in the form of rent controls. We've made, instead, a much better choice to open up the supply of new land for homes and to make it a priority, supporting councils with the cost of infrastructure needed to get them online fast, like sewer, roads and stormwater services. The $2 billion Residential Activation Fund has already secured commitments for thousands of new home sites into the market. We've deployed our newly established Productivity Commission to examine the opportunities to improve the construction sector to deliver more affordable residential homes and better taxpayer value in infrastructure projects. If you saw its interim report, you'll know that the industry was actually producing less than 35,000 dwellings a year. That's dropping down to the number that were being produced, a little less than the number that were being produced 40 years ago, in the 80s, when Queensland's population was half what it is now. In fact, labour productivity in the construction sector is only 5% higher than it was in 1995. And you might say, well, Amanda, 5% is an improvement. But if you compare that to the broader market over the same period, well, their productivity grew by 65% over the same period when you factor in everything from technological change to improvements in processes. And if you dive even deeper, you'll see that since 2018 in particular, construction productivity has actually declined by around 9% in Queensland. That means, to break it down, that the construction industry needs 9% more labour now than it did in 2018 to produce exactly the same as what it did then. Around that time, you might be thinking, what happened? Why? Why 2018? And the answer is this. That's when Labor brought in what they called the Best Practice Industry Conditions, or BPIC. That title is an exercise in creative writing, I might add, because it has not produced by any measure best practice in anything. It was a sweetheart deal that forced the model CFMEU demands onto absolutely everybody who was involved in delivering public infrastructure projects. And what was the result? Lawlessness on sites, employers forced to hire union thugs who weren't on the tools, high attrition rates of young tradies who didn't want to spend their entire career enduring that culture, appalling bullying and intimidation, and higher project costs to the tune of between 30% and 40% that flowed into higher prices in non-government construction projects right across the state. It revealed that the Productivity Commission, revealed that on Queensland worksites, just 2.5 days a week were being productively used. Half. And so we've taken action. The Commission of Inquiry has been appointed to tackle lawlessness on Queensland construction sites once and for all. We paused BPIC, and we're working to improve land use, working to streamline and speed approval processes. We've done a first round of cuts to regulation in the industry, including in the licensing and QBCC spaces. I promise you, there will be more. We've cut stamp duty for first home buyers at the same time as pulling every available lever to improve supply. The Boost to Buy program has even had a strong response. We're working to match training to skills shortages and offering more places for state-supported training in the key areas that are needed in construction, but also in other sectors that are facing extreme shortages. I could keep going for a very long time, but safe to say this, there's been a lot of action in just 10 months of an LNP government, and I promise you, we are just getting started. After 10 years of decline, we owe it to Queensland and to Queenslanders of all walks of life to fight relentlessly for better productivity. Not because of ideology, not because we want to please economists, but because it is the most deeply just thing we can do to provide opportunity, to provide hope for Queenslanders of all walks of life. Thanks for the chance to be with you.